Hi, good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Mental Health. I'm Nels Kloster. I'm an addiction psychiatrist working in Southern Vermont.
My name is Robert Stack. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor and mental health counselor. And last week we finished up, we were talking a little bit about alcoholism, and we had a question someone sent in. And all we had a chance to do was talk a little bit about the denial, how people sort of adjust or rationalize.
I had to go on and on about the other question.
That's all right. No, I thought we did really well. And as a matter of fact, I asked the producer if we ever heard from the person who asked that question. Right. And we haven't heard, so because that was very close to giving treatment.
About as close as we tried to stay away from getting.
No, I mean, I think it was valid. I mean, it was a legitimate question. So, but we want to finish, we talk a little bit more about alcoholism. And I was sort of joking before the show started that I wanted to review some of the symptoms of how we make a diagnosis of alcohol dependency. And we never know who's watching this show. I don't know that there's any alcoholics watching this show. Perhaps family members or loved ones, or just people who work in the field, whatever it might be. But just in case, I want to give somebody the opportunity.
Somebody told me that once too. I was asking for feedback on what they've seen in the show, and they said, well, I think that people that should watch aren't watching.
Yeah.
And I thought, I think that people who love somebody who they think should be watching.
That's right. But let me just talk a little bit about the symptoms, and if you identify with them, and the rest is up to you. So, very first thing that you want to look at when you talk about making a diagnosis is probably the two physical symptoms. And that is there a withdrawal? When you stop drinking, when you stop. Now, most people call a hangover. I mean, that's really withdrawal. But as you drink more and more, and as you drink more frequently, you'll begin to notice that there is a withdrawal throughout the day. And so I think one of the first indicators of serious problems with alcohol, and I'm not just talking about social use or occasional, New Year's Eve or something, but when you begin to realize that every day you're sick until you get another drink in you, or you notice that you're having really rough mornings. Other people remark.
Right. I mean, sweats and chill, anxiety, sweats and chills, so cravings for it, stomach upset, shakiness, tremor.
That's right. And again, people who are a little bit concerned about their drinking will begin to rationalize some of these symptoms and begin to make excuses for them. But really what it is it's drug withdrawal. And I mentioned this last week, I'm going to repeat myself. Alcohol's a drug. And so when we talk about drug withdrawal, you get that from alcohol. And quite frankly, for some people who drink a lot and drink daily, it can be a life-threatening withdrawal. So anyway, the other symptom that you sort of look for, it's a physical phenomenon of tolerance. And that is that you begin to develop a tolerance for the drug, and you need more of the drug to get the same effect. I mean, I think that's a valid description.
You get less effect from the same amount, or you need more to get the same effect.
Right. And you'll see sometimes people will sort of edge up, and that's when you get into people sometimes drinking a lot of beer. I mean, they realize they really need to drink more than 2 beers or 4 beers, 6 beers, and all of a sudden they're bringing home one of these candle case. And you also see some alcoholics at that point switch to vodka. And you'll see them switch to whiskey because the amount of alcohol they need, they just can't drink that much beer.
It won't even fit in the stomach.
It won't fit in there, and it's not quick enough. I mean, quite frankly, especially if you're dealing with withdrawal. So you'll begin to see people starting to mix whiskey because they can get more alcohol in their system quicker. And again, that's you go from drinking a 6-pack of beer, you might go to a pint of whiskey and think that you're making progress.
It's only drinking one.
That's right, because you're only drinking the one drink. And you also see it sometimes, and I'm sorry to make a big deal of this, but you'll see sometimes people will say, I'm only having 2 glasses, but the glass is getting larger.
Right.
The amount of alcohol is getting larger.
That's why we always ask. When you say, I only have a glass, well, how big is the glass?
How big is the glass? That's right. And do you ever have more? So I think those are the first 2 things that you sort of look for. Is there signs of withdrawal when you don't drink? And then again, do you find yourself drinking more to get the same effect?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of add something about that because what I've seen with a lot of folks who maybe they're still going to work and they're coming home and then basically drinking until they fall asleep at night. And a lot of them start to develop anxiety around 5 o'clock, then 4 o'clock, then 3 o'clock, and will often go to their doctor and say, I have these like anxiety attacks, or I'm becoming anxious all the time. It hits me in the afternoon. And that's really the onset of withdrawal coming through.
Right.
So it's not quite to the level that they realize, oh, wow, you know, I'm really need to have a drink in order to steady myself. But they're starting to have the early onset of it. And so then often they wind up getting prescribed anxiety medications, which work very similar to alcohol, you know, the benzodiazepines, in which case then there's another way they've sort of increased the load on their body. They've increased their tolerance by drinking, having that anxiety from withdrawal, not recognizing it, and then adding on this medication like you know, Ativan or Klonopin, Xanax, which works to the same receptors. So in a way, you've then boosted your intake and further sort of increased your tolerance to the intoxicating effects of those medications, those drugs.
And again, you know, it's like they don't pay enough attention to the fact that alcohol is a drug, and they're taking a drug, and they're taking it every day. And it's complicated when you take more drugs or other drugs with it. I also, just to mention a couple other things, one of the things you'll notice with alcoholics and people getting in trouble with booze is that they can't predict necessarily how much they're going to drink on any given occasion. Right. Now, a lot of times they try to limit their supply with the idea that by limiting their supply, they'll only drink that much. And of course, that's when a lot of drunks get DWIs, because they go back out to get some more. Right, or you'll find some alcoholics will keep a stash in the basement, like a case or 2 cases, or extra bottles around. I don't know if you're old enough. You know, you are probably. But it used to be guys in Massachusetts used to have to come to Vermont on Sunday to get a drink.
Well, the blue laws.
The blue laws. Yeah. And stores along the borders would actually have people coming across the bridge. And now these guys on Saturday said to themselves, I need to get enough for tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
But they already drank that.
Yeah.
Or it's mid-afternoon and it's gone. I mean, so I just want to say that you'll notice that it's sort of, there's an unpredictability to it. And I think that's one of the things that's sort of so difficult for family members sometimes, is that the person drinks every day and they say, look, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm not harming anybody, I just have a couple drinks at dinner and I go to bed, you know. But every once in a while, every 2 or 3 months, gets in a jackpot. Drinks too much, goes out and drinks too much, maybe parks the car on the lawn. And, I mean, you know, it's just like you just can't regulate it. If something goes different, if it's a holiday or there's more access, there's more availability, you'll find them sometimes, you know, and you'll see drunks promise themselves, I'm not going to drink any more than this, or this is my last one. And, you know, it's a joke, but it's not really a joke. How many drunks are sitting at bars saying, I'm going home with the next one? Mm-hmm. Or one more and then I'm going to go home. One
for the road.
And you can almost determine, there could be 5 guys come in after work and sit at the bar, and 3 of them actually go home for supper. Yeah. And 2 of them don't make it. Right. I mean, you know, sometimes they'll put booze in their car with the idea that this will help me get home. And so that sometimes is a way to get out of the bar and get in the car, is knowing that there's booze in the car.
So also the alcohol becomes a thread throughout their activities.
That's right. And get me home, and then I'll have one at home, and I'll be okay. But you'll sometimes see that almost they can't even describe how hard it is to not leave. I mean, people will say, well, why didn't you leave? Or how come you didn't come home for supper? Or why didn't you do that? And if you're not an alcoholic, it just doesn't make sense. But if you are an alcoholic, it's part of the illness.
Yeah, and you make me think about so you've been going over this criteria for dependence, or what we would consider as sort of early sort of addiction.
Yeah.
And right now, sort of, when we talk about abuse as being a step down from that, although the new way of looking at this, when the next manual comes out about diagnosis, is going to stop that sort of dichotomy, that it's either abuse is dependence, and put it on a larger scale with a lot more factors to kind of make it a continuous symptom, but a continuous spectrum. But to look at sort of trouble with relationships, legal difficulties, impacting your work performance, and getting involved in maybe sort of risky activities while you're under the influence of the alcohol. So, you know, we don't want to miss, we don't just talk about that sort of endpoint when you actually go, say, a full-blown alcoholic. But there's also this piece, too, of maybe if we can sort of plant this seed, that there are earlier things that happen first.
Yeah.
Which is with those, you know, relationships, work, legal problems, and risky behaviors.
Well, I like to consider all symptoms equal, but one that I think is a real benchmark of addiction is, do you continue to drink even after negative consequences? You know, I mean, do you still drink and drive after a DWI? Do you continue to drink after you've lost a relationship or a marriage to your drinking? You know, because at that point, you probably are aware of the problems that alcohol is causing in your life, and yet you continue to do it. And I think that's always a mark, if you will. A lot of people will say, you know, I'm not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a problem. I'm not going to do it. But if you see that kind of, there's been a problem in my life. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you'll see with some alcoholics is that they begin to negotiate with the booze. And the booze is sort of part of their life. And it's almost like, and I don't mean this as a joke, but some alcoholics will get a DWI and they will stop driving.
Right, not stop drinking.
Not stop drinking, that's right.
Yeah.
They will stop driving.
Stop driving, yeah.
Especially like in Massachusetts where you go to jail if you get another DWI. So they'll decide that. And the other thing is that you'll sometimes see it sort of moves center stage. People will describe you as a drinker. Mm-hmm. Like people you'll be known at the liquor store. They'll be your friends at the liquor store.
First name basis.
First name basis, that's right.
Yeah.
And it becomes more and more center stage in your life. I mean, your children will bring your frosted glass to you. They want to be part of the ritual. You don't go any place where there's not booze. Right. I mean, so you begin to sort of, you'll see booze become not just like something that's add on to your life, or like someone who drinks wine with dinner, it becomes dinner.
Well, you know, it's a relationship. How many times we talk to sort of spouses, you know, partners of alcoholics, and it's like an infidelity because there's this relationship that is centered on the booze that it takes on the qualities of being a mistress.
Right.
Right. So you know, always going to that relationship. Others don't matter, and this whole idea of, honey, here's how I'll keep you happy, right? I'll keep this relationship going, right? I don't want to stop drinking. I'll stop driving so we can still be together. There's a lot of aspects that are very similar to a relationship.
That's right, and it's a negotiation. I'm glad you mentioned it. It really is. It's a sort of this idea about how I know I have a problem. I know I need booze. I can't live without booze. But I know someone once said, you know, I only go to work so I can make enough money to buy my drinks.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly. I mean, when you realize that you're working for the money to buy the drug, and the drug is alcohol, you know you're in trouble.
I mean, it's like how you define the problem, right? I don't have a drinking problem. I got a driving problem, so I stop driving. I don't make enough money to fight my alcohol, so I've got a money problem. Or my partner is constantly nagging me, criticizing me about my drinking, so I have a relationship problem. He or she doesn't understand. And it's just that, like I say, that whole way of reframing it, that if you're standing outside of it all, that just it doesn't seem reasonable. It's like, can't you see that? But of course, that's that lack of self-awareness or denial, if you want to call it that, is such a central part of this.
And one of our questions, and we'll come back to it, but one of our questions is somebody who stopped drinking and wants to go back to drinking. And again, that's another symptom of it. In other words, have you ever told yourself, I have to stop drinking? And you do, and you pull it off, but then you start again. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, why'd you start again? Well, I just really... I
missed her, man.
I missed her.
Yeah.
But it's part of that. You'll see these patterns, and especially when I used to work in the hospital, you know, people who would get periods of not drinking, and, you know, they were in terrible mess, terrible withdrawal. You would think they'd be so grateful never to drink again, you know. I mean, you know, do whatever they need to do. And then one bright day they go, you know, I think I'll have a drink.
Yeah.
I mean, to them at that moment, it sounds like a good idea. Geez, I think I'll have a drink.
Yeah, but you know, pain is not that great a motivator. I mean, in the short term, you know the stove's hot, you don't touch it. You've had this you've been sort of knocked upside the head with the DUI or with the physical illness or withdrawal and winding up in the hospital, but pain fades after a while. I mean, none of us are brothers or sisters if pain didn't fade and then pleasant memories didn't take over, right? So I think that's what's happened, is they forget about all that pain, and maybe then the life that they've started to develop without the alcohol is not that pleasing, not that satisfying. And so, you know, I think I was happier back then. Yeah. I think I felt more content. I missed the alcohol, and maybe I can control it this time. Maybe it'll be different now, and I can have it both ways.
Because I worked in the hospital for 29 years, and I worked with people who were really sick at this stage. I mean, you know, and you would look at them, and you would wonder, you know, your liver is shot, everything is shot. you're sick as a dog, and you thought you could have a beer. I mean, in AA they talk about insanity, and you have to understand this person is crazy. This is no, I mean they're not rational. I mean, this is the mental illness of alcoholism. Is when your brain, after all you've been through, and I know I tend to talk about the severe cases, but when your brain gives you permission to do it again, that's the sign that it's an illness. I mean, and again, you know, I mean, you can be young and still negotiating and not have that much trouble, and I think that's fine. But, you know, so many of the people that I worked with in the hospital, I mean, you would just shake your head. You would say, now, let me get this straight. You went to the hospital and you didn't have a drink for 5 months, and things were getting better, and you were healthy, and everything was all right, and what did you do? Oh, I had a beer.
We always thought, wouldn't it be a really powerful thing if you could film people when they're going through this? And so they could then refer back to it. They could see for themselves what
they would
everybody
erase
else
the
was
tape.
saying. Well, they would say, you know, I wonder what they would say. Right?
I'm telling you, they would have the tape for 3 months, and around month 2, they would erase it. They would say, I think I'm going to record sports on that.
Right.
I don't need that anymore.
Or, you know, it's going to be different. I'm still going to be different
That's
this
right.
time.
I won't forget. I won't forget. So let me just finish this. So the question that we got was, I've been sober for 3 years. I stopped on my own, never joined a program. Recently I've been wondering, can I start to drink moderately? And I think that's a wish of most alcoholics, is that, boy, I wish I could be a social drinker. I wish I could be a moderate drinker. Now, moderate is like, well, who's to say what's moderate?
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a sliding definition.
Most definitely. And, you know, you may say, well, I'm just going to have a beer a day or something, you know. Well, good luck with you. You know, if you pull it off, that's fine.
Yeah. But from experience, well, you know, I'm doing really great on one.
Yeah.
I think I'll have a second one today.
And again, I would go back to it. It really speaks to the magic of it, you know. And we were talking before the show, you know, what is it about the drug that makes people, what makes it so good for them?
Yeah. Well, you know, it hits on so many different areas in the brain. We talk about you know, receptors, and any kind of drug or medication that's going to work has to sort of find a home in the brain, you know, a receptor that it will fit into and turn on. And while alcohol primarily works as something called the GABAergic system, which is, in essence, we have, if you could think of how everybody's heard of fight or flight, or like to sort of talk about fight, flight, or fear being the sort of adrenaline states and normal reactions to dangerous or scary situations or stressful situations. But there's a counterpart to that system. And just to keep it simple, we sort of talk about rest and digest. So you're in sort of rest and digest mode, or you're in fight, flight, freeze mode. And any times of the day, these are always sort of communicating. It's a fluid sort of state between those two. And what the alcohol will do is it sort of takes the place of this rest or digest state. So if you're anxious, you're nervous, you're scared, you're angry, then you can decrease that, those feelings, with the alcohol. So that's where it works its strongest effects in the kind of the receptors where the molecules find their home. But it's not the only system. It also hits the dopamine system, which we know as sort of the main pleasure chemical, with almost everything that is addictive or pleasurable has some kind of interaction, either direct or indirect, with the dopamine system. And then you also have the serotonin system is another one within which alcohol has an impact. And we know that from antidepressants, you know, things like Prozac and Paxil, we call, you know, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that more serotonin helps us to be happy as well. So you can almost see what a sort of a great thing this is, that alcohol impacts so many areas of the brain in order to help us feel good. And it starts off in lower amounts, having what's called a euphoric effect. Yeah. Meaning, first of all, we feel good, we feel relaxed, we feel happy. But then, of course, with larger quantities, then you get a sort of the depressant effect. And, you know, my coordination is decreased, my consciousness, I'm falling asleep. You know, and in its worst case, you know, drinking so much that you actually stop breathing. So, you know, a lot of different areas in the brain where this works.
And that's where it gets tricky, because I think some people could quit early on without help, like this person who called in, while they still have a choice about drinking. And I noticed this, like I said, more severe alcoholics I used to work with, and then there's people who are social drinkers who drink once every 6 months or something. But the daily drinker, and especially, like, I've always been struck by guys who wouldn't drink at work and drink immediately after work.
Yeah.
And I was saying before the show that I almost think it's like they're more comfortable at work, they're more confident at work, they feel better about themselves at work, more productive, if you will. And here's the rules of the game. You can't drink and do my job. But as soon as I'm not working, well, I'm going to go home to my family. I'm going to go home to my children. But for that, I can do a drug.
Right, right. And we were kind of discussing earlier on whether that had to do with competence.
Right.
Right. That I know what I'm doing at work. I don't quite know what I'm doing with, with my partner, with my kids. I feel less skilled around it. I feel like I have less control at home. And I don't want to make this sexist. I mean, men, women, I'm sure we all sort of struggle with this idea of am I being a good father, am I being a good mother, am I being a good husband, am I being a good wife, which is a very dicey sort of thing, much more complicated than work might be, versus is there an importance attached to one over the other? Being men, it's quite easy to place too much importance on work and realize you're not spending enough time at home and having to sort of balance that out. So I'm not sure whether it's competence or importance, but surely something very important is going on that home seems to be the place initially where it gets out of control.
And what's kind of sad in a way, though, I mean, alcohol advertisement is always geared for the daily drinker. I mean, if you drink once in a while, the liquor industry could care less what you drink. But they want the daily drinker. And their advertisement is often sort of says, you're entitled to this, or you earn this, or this is a reward for your work, or, it's Miller time, or whatever way you want to think about it. But, and it becomes part of the rationalization for doing the drug. I deserve to relax. I deserve to cut back. And I think it's at some point, it's like saying when I go to my family for the holidays, I get nervous. So I drink when because I'm with my families and and the sad thing is that for a lot of people, that works okay, But for a few people, 10%, 20%, 15% of the people, after a while, drinking will become the substitute for the holiday. There was a woman that says that. Sometimes it's you drink because you're playing baseball, but after a while, you're drinking, but you're not playing baseball. I mean, you're drinking because you're celebrating something good, but after a while, you're just celebrating the drink. I mean, it becomes, your world gets smaller and smaller and more narrow.
Yeah, all these things sort of fall away.
Yeah.
And then you realize the alcohol is really a central piece.
And back when you could have stopped, you still thought, no, it's not a problem. I mean, I'm only drinking because I'm at a party, or because I'm doing this, because I went to work. And anyway, so...
So I'm still playing baseball.
I don't mean to get off on that, but I mean, it's one of the indicators, if you will, that at first it's part of something, but a lot of times for the alcoholic, it becomes a substitute for it. There's a woman that does a show about alcohol and advertising. She says that, and I wish I can think of her name.
Yeah, but it's amazing. I was before I moved down here, I was involved with a community meeting once, and I hadn't really realized it, naively at the time, but advertisements are everywhere. You can't go to the store, you can't get gas, you can't stop in at a Quick Mart whatsoever, because it's there. The advertisements are there. And I was sort of looking, again, I'm not one to keep statistics in my head because I find them kind of dull at times, but 90% of people in the U.S. have at one point in their life had a drink. And I don't know how many substances we can talk about that 90% of us have actually tried at some point in time. So it's all over the place. I can't imagine how much more difficult it is when you're alcoholic to say, well, this is abnormal what I'm doing, when it's everywhere being normalized as sort of I deserve it, everybody else is doing it, and of course I feel like, oh yeah, why can't I?
Yeah, I'm all right with that. But if you have a parent or a grandparent or somebody in your family that's an alcoholic, those ads don't pertain to you. And you should know that your risk factor for the genetics of alcoholism is incredible. It's very, very high. And don't be sucked into this idea that, well, my life can be like a commercial. Because no, your life is going to be like some horrible movie.
I mean, you said this book was a Triumph of Experience about the Harvard Grant study of men. So men that have been followed for what? Wow, like 70, 80, 70 years at least. And looking at sort of the drinking, and there's always been this idea that chicken and egg. alcoholic, is that why you're depressed? You're depressed, that's why you're alcoholic.
Yeah.
And not just in this book, but also in some other things I've been reading, it really seems to be coming down to, that genetic influence is probably the strongest thing. That's the biggest piece. It's maybe not a 50-50 balance, and it's the alcohol leading to depression as opposed to the other way around. Right. So again, it's sort of another way of sort of getting our heads around that and looking, as hard as it is sometimes to talk about cause and effect, there seems to be a direction going there. Alcohol really is the central damaging, devastating piece of this whole array of symptoms and problems that we see.
And it's interesting, one of the things they found out, and we're going to talk about this next week when we talk about stages of change and motivational interviewing. Some people who drink, and a lot of people who drink, let's put it the other way, a lot of people end up in emergency rooms have had alcohol. And when I say a lot, I don't want to get into percentages, but a certain percentage of them. And one of the things they found out is that for some people, if the doctor or somebody in the emergency room says to them, well, this is your alcohol, and maybe alcohol had something to do with this. Right. Some people actually stop.
Brief interventions.
Brief interventions. I mean, if you can get them at that stage where they're moving from social, people say don't use my hands, but if you're moving from social to severe or dependency, there's that place in the middle where you could actually maybe stop. Just realize this, and this is a risk factor, and I really can't do this drug anymore. And it's not the end of the world when you can't drink, when you don't drink anymore. I mean, anyway, don't get me started.
A lot of happy stuff. Well, we already did for like 25 minutes here, right? So should we try to take one more question then?
I'm an alcohol and drug counselor. Did you notice?
It shows, Robert. It shows.
All right, go ahead. So, your turn.
So my husband drinks, and I'm worried about him. What can I say that he will listen to let him know that he needs help? All right. So, again, I mean, like we've been talking about, I wonder if he actually sort of has the kind of the ears to hear this right now.
Yeah, and again, it's when she says she's worried about him. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, does he drink and drive? I mean, is she worried that it's getting worse? Is he angry in the home? Are the kids scared of him?
Or is she a total teetotaler? And he actually has a drink on the weekends, and she's thinking, wow, I'm worried. So it's tough to say just from the question alone.
And I think that, and again, she asked, will he listen, to let him know he needs help. I mean, I'm imagining that she's at the point now where she's making some kind of diagnosis. I mean, that you need help. Right. This is moved beyond, like your partner doesn't want to be a nag, and they might say, you only have a couple beers, or just, do you have to have that second drink, or, but next week, and we're going to do this,
right.
Stages of Change motivational interviewing. The thing I'm concerned about is I don't want her to get into an argument about it.
Right.
And I don't want him. When we talk about this next week, what happens sometimes when you tell somebody to do something they don't want to do, they defend their right to do it.
Because then he goes from having an alcohol problem to I got a wife problem.
That's right.
I got a relationship issue. She doesn't understand.
She doesn't understand. Yeah. And then you get resentment and you get angry. And then now you've got some other problems going on. And so I think you want to be really careful about this, like, how can I get him to listen to me? I think one of the ways, then we'll go into this, and Al-Anon, and there's some ideas, but one of the things that you can do is not to make excuses. And this gets really difficult, but I used to tell people, do everything you can to help somebody get better, but don't cover up their disease.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't cover up the symptoms of the illness. If you make it better for them, if you lie for them, if you adjust your lifestyle for them, if you some way, it's like families have their own denial sometimes. They don't want to believe somebody's an alcoholic.
We have a system that's working, especially it's good enough for government work, right? It's not broken, it's lasting, but you never know what's going to cause people to change.
Right.
Significant events, big events, like we're talking about brief interventions. So maybe we can help with that next week to sort of give people an idea what they can do to sort of foster change or be fertile to it.
And if you have any questions, please call. Send us an email. Thank you very much.